Welcome back to From the Region with Richard Giragosian. This is the fourth in a series of weekly programs offering analytical review and assessment of developments in Armenia and the broader region. This week's focus will start, of course, with a review of developments regarding Nagorno-Karabakh. But this week's program will focus much more on domestic developments within the Republic of Armenia. But first, regarding Nagorno-Karabakh. The Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev met with Russian President Dmitry Medvedev for a closed several-hour working visit in Sochi. Much of the meeting was about Azerbaijani-Russian relations, which is improving, but much of the meeting focused on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and represents the latest effort by the Russian president to mediate and to host a diplomatic meeting between the Armenian and Azerbaijani presidents. Similarly, during a summit meeting of the Collective Security Treaty Organization in Astana, Kazakhstan, Armenian President Serge Sargsyan also held a private meeting with the Russian president. In effect, both the Azerbaijani and Armenian presidents tried to argue their case and their position before the Russian president. Neither meeting revealed much of what is going on, but it does reveal that Russia is increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress, especially given the fact that the Russian president is investing much personal capital and time in mediating a breakthrough regarding Nagorno-Karabakh. We can be safe to say, however, that any real breakthrough or progress regarding Nagorno-Karabakh remains unlikely and distant, especially given the fact that both sides remain very far apart and Azerbaijan seems committed to a maximalist diplomatic strategy with little in terms of concession or compromise. But while we shouldn't expect much from Nagorno-Karabakh in terms of diplomacy, there was an interesting development this past week. The Nagorno-Karabakh defense minister, Lieutenant General Movses Hagopian, had a press conference where he revealed probably too much in terms of how the Nagorno-Karabakh armed forces was, in his opinion, some 20% stronger and 20% more combat ready. Unfortunately, the defense minister tended to reveal a little too many details in his press conference regarding an arms buildup and preparations to prevent war and counter the threat of war from Azerbaijan. But what is most interesting is, in the broader perspective, the Nagorno-Karabakh defense minister revealed something significant at the end of his press conference. And that was when asked by a journalist about the need for reform within the armed forces of Nagorno-Karabakh. In other words, to prevent and to correct Soviet practices of hazing, of beating, assaults, and mistreatment of Armenian soldiers and Karabakh conscripts by their officers. The defense minister revealed an interesting fact. According to Defense Minister Hagopian, some 244 military personnel within Nagorno-Karabakh are currently facing criminal charges. 50 officers are included within this group of 244. Which means that 50 serving officers in Nagorno-Karabakh are now facing criminal charges for mistreating their own soldiers. What this problem reveals is a deeper trend, a trend of mistreatment and unacceptable discipline and conditions within the armed forces of both the Republic of Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. While some steps have been taken, not enough is being done to hold military officers accountable for their actions and mistreatment of soldiers serving under their command. This is a question of pride and honor of the armed forces of Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. And this does reveal that such misbehavior and a lack of discipline deserves no tolerance and should be addressed in a very sincere and very official way. Moving on from Nagorno-Karabakh, however, this is the month of August. Traditionally, the month of August, we see a number of tourists coming to Armenia, mainly from the Armenian diaspora. What's interesting now, however, is we also see the start of what's called the Pan-Armenian Games, which is a series of athletic Olympic-style events designed to bring the diaspora and the Republic of Armenia closer together, as both are components of the larger Armenian nation. But now that the diaspora is back in Armenia, let's be honest. Let's also address a few things and realities of the relationship and the lack of relationship between the Armenian diaspora and the Republic of Armenia. In many ways, the Armenian diaspora is really a diaspora of many different communities. In other words, the Armenians living in Russia, Argentina, France, the United States, and Canada have many important cultural divisions and differences. What's also important and significant is that the Armenian diaspora as a whole, with all of its different and diverse communities, also has a difference and a division fundamentally with the Republic of Armenia. What we need to do is to find a way to bridge these differences and to make the divisions much less. Why this is important is because there is a dysfunctional relationship today between the diaspora and the Republic of Armenia. What I'm referring to is a refusal or a unwillingness for both sides to understand the reality of the other. In other words, for diasporans coming to Armenia, Armenia today is much more than city center, much more than the Armenian Marriott, much more than the few boutique stores, Armani, Hugo Boss. There is wealth in Armenia, but it's wealth within the hands of a very small, very privileged and powerful minority. Disparities of wealth and income, divisions in wealth and income are profound and are growing bigger. This is a reality that the Armenian diaspora needs to relate to and to understand. In many ways, Yerevan, with its population of slightly over 1 million, and the Republic of Armenia, the rest of the Republic of Armenia, represents a very different reality than Yerevan as the capital. We see a second Armenia beyond the outskirts of Yerevan, where rural poverty, lack of electricity in some cases, a lack of potable water in many cases, makes the disparities in Armenia even more profound. The diaspora needs to understand that there is also a second Armenia, much more realistically in terms of acknowledging the underlying differences and unacceptable deficiencies in Armenian life. Armenian society today faces many problems that are not always recognized by the diaspora. In other words, for the Armenian diaspora, genocide recognition, of course, is a driving mission. And in fact, Armenia's relations or pursuit of relations with Turkey is also an important factor. But there are other important factors as well in Armenia, including setbacks to democracy, problems with economic development, and especially the closed political and economic system of Armenia. But what's also important to remember is the dysfunctional relationship between the diaspora and the Republic of Armenia should be grounds for criticism for both sides. In other words, it's not fair to only criticize the diaspora for failing to recognize the diversity and reality of Armenia and its problems. We also need to focus on what the Armenian government is and isn't doing regarding its relationship or its part of the relationship with the Armenian diaspora. Specifically, what I'm talking about is that many in the Armenian government see the diaspora as a convenient, sometimes inconvenient, outside player. In other words, for many in the Armenian government, and especially those running the Armenian economic system, they would prefer the diaspora to be a passive or silent investor at best. What the diaspora needs to do is to more effectively challenge and to hold to account the Armenian government, no matter which Armenian government. The Armenian government, in terms of ruling the country instead of governing the country, needs to be challenged to uphold reform and the spirit of democracy in a more effective way. But we also see the Armenian government actually imposing obstacles, making life in Armenia for those from the diaspora who want to move here, making it harder, not easier, for the Armenian diaspora to move or to become more actively involved and engaged in the daily life of Armenia. This also needs to change and to be challenged. But we also see in the broader perspective, this is also about nationalism. not the typical Armenian nationalism directed against Azerbaijan and against Turkey. We actually need, in addition, patriotism. In other words, we need more patriotism in terms of being proud of what Armenia is accomplishing and building, whether it's economic development or democracy. There's not enough patriotism and a little too much nationalism. And we need to also recorrect the imbalance between the diaspora and the Republic of Armenia. Now let me turn to domestic issues, because the diaspora, especially given the fact that there are large numbers from the diaspora here in Armenia this month, they need to also understand the domestic challenges and developments within Armenia proper to both better understand the Armenian reality, but to honestly and critically appraise what is needed in the relationship between the diaspora and the Republic of Armenia. First of all, domestically, we see in general a problem that can be defined as an arrogance of power, a culture of impunity, where the Armenian government is tending to rule the country rather than governing the country, with little accountability. In every country, whether it's Russia, France, or even the United States, many governments, in terms of exerting power and ruling the system, try to maximize and benefit their own power. What's different in other countries, especially like the United States or in European countries, is there are checks and balances. There are healthy competition of interests within different branches of government and within the empowered civil society or citizen. In the Armenian case, there's not enough of a check and balance on government accountability and power. This needs to change in terms of building a more democratic and a more developed Armenian society. What we also see, however, is specific examples of this arrogance of power. Armenia's national police chief, Alex Sargsyan, recently had a press conference defending the actions of a police unit in central Yerevan that were engaged in a confrontation and an incident with several youth activists from the Armenian National Congress. It's not clear exactly what transpired, but what we can criticize and point to as a problem is the general reaction of the police. In general, in Armenia, the police tend to overreact and resort to either physical assault or intimidation, where the system of justice, the rule of law itself, is undermined by the lack of an independent judiciary and by the lack of proper procedure and conduct among the police. In this particular case, we see while a bigger or broader dialogue is underway between the Armenian government and the opposition, namely the Armenian National Congress. At the same time, youth activists from the Armenian National Congress, some of which are now being held in administrative detention prior to trial, are jailed for several months, facing criminal charges of what's called hooliganism, interfering with the police. Very much a Soviet legacy. There is not enough transparency and little in terms of protecting the rule of law in this case. Another example is the Yerevan municipal government and the mayor's decision to dismantle several small trading stalls or kiosks. In effect, trying to remove and change the face of Yerevan and to actually clean up or dismantle small independent private traders from earning their living. It's not so much the decision as to how the decision was made and how this is carried out. And in fact, what is most interesting, there is now a disagreement between the Prime Minister's office and the Mayor of Yerevan's office in terms of how best to enforce the law without being carried away with a disregard for citizen rights and due process of law. But what we also see in the broader perspective is that we need to be reminded of one important trend. This important trend is that one of the other domestic differences or divisions that we see is increasing numbers of Armenians being forced to leave Armenia in search of employment outside of Armenia. The lack of jobs and, more importantly, the lack of opportunity is weakening Armenia from within. This needs to be recognized as one of the most serious threats to Armenian national security and needs to be better and effectively addressed by the Armenian government, which unfortunately has yet to really recognize this problem. But there is an interesting side effect to this problem of migration or emigration. That is this: Armenia is a very small country physically. In fact, Armenia, in terms of population and geography, is both landlocked and very small in size. This is normally a negative trend in terms of national power. There is an interesting positive element, however, in that with the population and size of Armenia being so small, what this really means is it doesn't take many people and it doesn't take much to institute real, lasting democratic reform when and if there's political will, when and if there's opportunity. This is also a generational issue, where a large number of Armenian university graduates are now entering the workforce in Armenia. They don't have sufficient opportunity, but they have an enormous drive, commitment, and skills, speaking at least 3 languages, being very familiar with the world, understanding the threats and opportunities of globalization. But without opportunity, without incentive to stay in Armenia, there's little hope for harnessing this talent. What this also means is, in every country throughout history, we've seen that most social change happens when a small group of committed citizens, believing in an ideal, set their mind to changing things for the better. This is inspired and succeeded in transforming many countries and many societies. And why not Armenia? Especially given Armenia's small size, where it doesn't take much and it won't take many for lasting change. However, the prerequisite is political will and an opportunity. And in fact, what we're going to do next week is examine more specifically who are the players in Armenia, who are the powerful political players, and who are the economic and commercial players in Armenia. We talk a lot about Armenia's closed political and economic systems, but next week we're going to analyze and assess who the players are maintaining the closed political and economic system, and in many ways how to address institutionally rather than individually ways to change Armenia for the better, to build deeper democracy and more fair and lasting socioeconomic development. Thank you for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week.